Hello, Professor Madawarsky. My article for review is Michael Bucknor's Brotherly Love and the Intimacies of Men in David Chariandy's Brother. My outline will cover a little bit about Dr. Michael A. Bucknor, a summary of his article, a little bit about the novel, and the author David Chariandy, and Bucknor's analysis of black male on male relationships in Brother, and about some themes: fraternal, homosocial, romantic, brotherly love, and my two questions. So Dr. Bucknor is an associate professor and senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica. His particular research interests include Caribbean Canadian writing, post-colonial literatures and theory, diaspora studies, masculinity, and popular culture. He's published a number of articles analyzing masculinity and intimacy among black male descendants of the Caribbean and analyzing how male-male relationships are viewed and presented to a wider audience. Some of his articles include Performing Masculinities in Jamaican Popular Culture, Cockmouth Kill Cock, and Dangerous Crossings, Caribbean Masculinities and the Politics of Challenging Gendered Borderlines. Canadian author David Chariandy explores themes of masculinity, identity, and race in his various works. In addition to Brother, he also published the award-winning novel Sukunya, which is another coming-of-age story that is centered on the relationship between a young black man and his mother, Adele. They, like the family and Brother, are part of the black lower/underclass. Brother takes place in the late 1980s to 90s, and it's set in the Scarborough housing complex called The Park. In the novel, the overall story follows Michael and Francis, sons of working-class Trinidadian immigrants with a black mother and their absentee South Asian father. They are challenged with stereotypes associated with young black and brown men. But more specifically, the novel focuses on Francis, the eldest son, and his growing strained relationship with his single mother, and simultaneously, as Bucknor points out in his article, Brother moves beyond the mother and son relationship to explore the intimacy among black males. Bucknor identifies, as I mentioned, three themes of male-male relationships in the novel: fraternal, homosocial, and romantic relationships, and he analyzes how intimacy is influenced and shaped within these relationships. Before Buckner identifies and analyzes the three types of male-male relationships, he reflects on how Chariandy introduces brotherly love and intimacy immediately in the beginning of the novel. Buckner begins by analyzing the very first scene of the novel and outlining how intimacies are presented between the brothers. In the introduction, Francis shares his secret hiding place with Michael, a place Michael describes as a weed, broke, and abandoned hydro pole. Francis is teaching Michael how to climb to the top of the pole, a climb Michael refers to as dangerous. Buckner suggests that the novel's depiction of male bonding in this early scene has a deeper meaning than an older brother spending time with a younger brother. Francis revealing his secret hiding place of solace, relaxation, and comfort to Michael is a form of initiation, or a rite of passage, as I would call it. Him teaching Michael how to climb to the very top of the pole with care allows them both to see past their current reality. Buckner states that it is Francis's way to show Michael how to navigate the world, decipher the ways of the street, and how to read the cartography or the mapping of the body. Buckner states that Chariandy's detailed introduction for the novel not only establishes the intimate bond between the two brothers, it also establishes the dangerous climb for black men in society. The dangerous climb reference moves beyond the reality of the actual climb to the top of the pole, but represents the uneasiness of how people of color negotiate their place in Canada. More specifically, the dangers/risks associated with black male intimacy in the world. He goes on to say that this informative one-page introduction guides how fraternal, homosocial, and romantic brotherly love is displayed throughout the novel. Fraternal intimacy is described in Cynthia Banner's book, The Brothers of Romulus, as an erotical but not necessarily sexually charged friendship among brotherhoods. The closeness is expected of brothers thought of as equivalent to the bond of lovers. And I think of that as members or brothers of a frat. There's that loyalty and brotherly love there, but not specifically on sexual terms. Bucknor suggests that black male-male intimacies are shaped by a number of variables, like economic and immigrant status. An example of this is Francis, being the eldest son, instinctively takes on the surrogate father role in the absence of their biological father. And because of this, he is the one whom Michael relies on for guidance in most situations. Michael views Francis as a leader. There is a shared intimacy that resembles a father and son relationship. Due to their mother's limited financial means, the boys share one room and sleep on bunk beds. This also plays a part in shaping the black male-male intimacy. Buckner states that the physical closeness of the boys in this limited space allow them to be so close that, like twins, when one brother has a nightmare, they both screamed together. There is this shared intimacy that resembles the closeness of fraternal twins. Buckner states that the instinctiveness of them sharing a vulnerable moment of fear is what solidifies their fraternal intimacy, and their shared vulnerability shapes different intimate experiences. Their intimacy is shaped by shared suffering after Francis's friend is shot by a police. It is also shaped by discouragement as they become aware of their sexuality throughout the novel in different ways, by watching porn or staying up late to hopefully get a sense of a woman's boob, I think, in a late night show. And they share a vulnerability of how they are viewed as violent or criminal because of Canada's association with black men to violence and criminality. Homosocial brotherly love is what I gathered is defined as the same sex relationships that are not of a romantic or sexual nature, such as friendship or mentorship. It involves more than two individuals in same sex relationships where there is a social preference to socialize with members of one's own sex rather than a sexual preference. In the novel, the fraternal brotherly love and intimacy that Francis shares with Michael for most of his life, he later exchanges that to experience a homosocial brotherly love as he begins to spend more time away from Michael and more time with the Black Brotherhood of Scarborough. Buckner refers to a number of scholarly works to examine Chariandy's portrayal of homosociality among black men as it appears in the novel. In Cornell Bogle's journal, The Spatial Politics of Homosexuality in Austin Clarke's In the City, Bogle examines masculinity in Canadian urban spaces. He argues that Clarke's collection of short stories shows how homosocial communal gatherings are manufactured responses by black male subjects in order to escape the often essentializing race, gendered, and sexualized politics of external hegemonic white spaces. An example of such a homosocial communal gathering in the novel would be that of Desiree's barbershop, where Francis and many of the neighborhood men gather to feel safe, share stories, feel accepted, and be hidden from the scrutiny of their community members and from the dominant society. He goes on to say that the link between homosocial subjectivities and Canadian spaces can be better articulated through Ronald Cummings' Maroon Spaces, which Ronald Cummings used to understand how queer subjects in the Caribbean navigate the heterosexual dominant society. The concept of maroon intimacy applies to the black males in the novel, whose homosocial world is both an escape from and a fortress against dominant culture. Homosocial groupings is a byproduct of racism and largely heteronormative power in Canada, where black men are often subject to higher levels of policing and vigilance. Michael describes watching this new form of intimacy and that his brother shares with the boys he didn't know very well by touching hands and sharing private jokes at Desiree's barbershop. But even there, Bucknor points out that the young men are continued to be surveilled by neighbors who label the boys as boys who possess police records. Bucknor quotes Phanuel and Twee, another scholar mentioned in Bucknor's article, as saying that surveillance and racial profiling of blackness and black men become the work for all citizens, courts, and laws. Francis, like many black men, watch how they are surveilled and viewed in the media and TV and in their own neighborhoods. After Anton, a young black man, is shot and killed by police, Michael states that they, being associates of Anton, were being watched by everyone, shopkeepers, neighbors, and passerbys. Buckner states if a lone black man is seen as a source of threat in Canadian culture, then black men banding or marooning themselves would be considered even more dangerous. In the novel, Desiree's barbershop becomes again a haven, a place where hard and soft masculinities can coexist, a place for dreams, creativity, liming, fellowship, brotherhood, and bromance. Buckner argues that male-male intimacies disturb the dominant images that often display black men as aggressive, hypersexualized thugs or hoodlums. But it is in the maroon space of Desiree's barbershop that Michael is able to observe the opposite of that. He was able to observe tender bromance and a potential full-scale romance between Francis and their friend Jelly. Earlier on in the article, Buckner points out that Chariandy uses body proximity and touch as a way to measure and read black men's intimacy, whether it be fraternal, homosocial, or romantic. And by the way of this measuring intimacy, this is how Michael learns of the developing closeness between Francis and his friend Jelly. Michael describes their closeness. They are whispering, their heads bent into each other. They slipped palms and joined fingers and hugged and stayed. And when they pulled apart, there were sweat marks where their bodies had touched. This body contact and lingering of bodies touching, Buckner states, announces the queer potential of their bromance. Buckner suggests that queer romantic male-male intimacy shared in private public spaces like Desiree's remained an unexplained, unnamed, and even unspeakable phenomenon within the black homosocial world. The secrecy associated with queer romantic relationship in the novel is understandable. In a quote from a black gay activist in Ronaldo Walcott's article, Homopoetics, the activist points out that if you wanted to find black gay men in Toronto, you had to go to New York, Buffalo, Detroit, and Washington. Further in the article, Walcott states that black queers find themselves as being seen as non existent or caught between Eurocentric queer histories and homophobic communities that seek to either deny their presence or view them in a state of progressive development. In Brother, Francis unfortunately meets his demise by defending his brother/lover, Jelly. Buckner states that in his attempt to challenge the racist, heteronormative system, the consequence is death. Black male-male relationships, as well as black male existence in Canada, is often charged by danger and risk, much like the symbolic climb of the hydro pole that Francis introduces to Michael at the beginning of the book. My two questions that I would have posed to the class is the first, the novel Brother was set in the 1980s, 1990s. Do you believe Black communities are more accepting today of Black LGBTQ relationships, especially with the increase of gay, lesbian, and queer representation in media, TV, and film? And secondly, Ronaldo Walcott states, in his article Homo Poetics, the spaces for the performance of black masculinity are largely characterized by musical cultures, fashion, or more accurately, style, and an urban bad boy aesthetic that tends to limit black men to performing a small number of roles in society. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why? Thank you.